Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Chrissy Raywalk, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Delaware. One of the things that I appreciate and enjoy most about leadership is that it's a journey, not a destination. It involves lots of different twists and turns, and you need many different types of people to go along with you on your journey in order for it to be successful. So today, I invite you to start your leadership journey with this podcast. Enjoy.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. This episode of 1Q will be hosted by Brian Blair, Deputy Athletics Director at Washington State University. Take it away, Brian.
Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. This is Brian Blair, and I'm the Deputy Athletic Director at Washington State University. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. I'm joined today by Ed Scott. Ed's the Director of Athletics at Morgan State. Full transparency, he's a good friend, a colleague, and a mentor, somebody I look up to in the industry. Ed, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Brian, and I appreciate your introduction. You're always too kind, my friend.
I've been watching from afar, and you and I have known each other for a while, and you're absolutely crushing it there at Morgan State. So definitely want to have you on and really talk about your experience. I think probably the best place to start is when you and I met. We were going through NCAA Leadership Institute. You were at another institution, and then Morgan State popped up. Why did you determine that Morgan State was the right opportunity for you? And maybe give our listeners that maybe not be familiar with Morgan and or HBCUs a little background on the institution itself.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. So first of all, you're making me feel old because we did meet at the NCAA Leadership Institution. At that time, I was at Binghamton University in upstate New York, where I was at for 7 years. And then I went to George Washington for a year before I came to Morgan. And we just won the NIT in men's basketball. We won 28 games that year. I really loved DC. My wife had just moved down from Binghamton, so we had only been in the area together for about 6 months. And then I got a call, Brian, from the Vice President of Student Affairs at Morgan State University, Dr. Kevin Banks. I'll never forget it. And I just happened to, sometimes you don't pick up the phone if you don't know the number. And on this one, I just happened to pick it up. And he said, listen, my name is Kevin Banks. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I'm leading the search for the next athletic director here at Morgan State. And I'll be fully candid. I didn't know much, if anything, about Morgan State. And so I said to Dr. Banks, I don't really know much about Morgan State. And so we had a really good conversation. Again, being honest, the first time I told him I wasn't interested. I had only been at GW for a year. We were having a lot of success. I had a really nice portfolio under me at GW, and I really loved living in DC. That 1 year in DC was a lot of fun. So I did some research on Morgan State, and I think this goes to your question about getting folks a little more familiar with Morgan State. We had 4 NFL Hall of Famers at Morgan State. A lot of folks don't know that. We won a Division II national championship in men's lacrosse, the 10 Bears. There's actually a movie about them. And then we also won a national championship in Division II with Marvin Webster, the human eraser, played at Morgan State. He's a Baltimore native. So really, like any job, that you're looking at, you start doing research. And the first thing that stuck out to me was that Morgan State at that time was about 149, 148 years old. So it was a long-standing tradition of Black excellence, number one, and social mobility. And number two, the tradition of the athletic department was steep and it was rich. And so as I looked at it from that angle, I said, this is something that I can probably get interested in. And so as I moved through the process at Morgan State, I think the thing that really put it over the top for me was the president, is the president, Dr. David Wilson. Brian, you and I talk about this a lot, in our own careers, the alignment when you're managing up. And it's even more crucial when you become the director of athletics. And I, in all honesty, I could not be more aligned with my president, Dr. Wilson. His experience, he went to Tuskegee as an undergrad, but all of his professional experience and the rest of his education was at predominantly white institutions. Particularly, he got a master's and a doctorate at Harvard. And he then worked his first job at Rutgers. And then from Rutgers, he was the first African-American vice president at a major institution in the state of Alabama. And then from there, he was a chancellor in the Wisconsin system, which is equivalent to being a president, as you know. And so as soon as we sat down, Brian, and we started talking about athletics, it was clear to me that he understood it the way I did, and that we shared a vision to get Morgan State back on track. And so as I went through the process, I've always wanted to be an AD. That was always my goal. I wanted to serve student athletes and provide them the type of experience that I had, that you had, that transformed our life. And Morgan State, I just felt was a great place at 36 years old to be a first-time AD. And I felt like they would give me the space to grow as a person and as a professional at the same time we were growing the athletic department. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I wanted to make sure that the listeners understand there are a lot of variables that go into making this type of decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think you dropped a lot of gems just now, and I was taking notes. I mean, I think first and foremost, that relationship with the president and how critical it is for an AD's success. And I've seen it firsthand here with our president, Kirk Schultz, and his relationship with Pat. And I get to see that kind of a little bit from the sidelines and see how he supports us and how he's a champion even when we're not in the room. And then as talking to you and hearing about your relationship with the president, but also, I mean, his esteemed background, his resume that he brings to the table, because you are a team in a sense, even though he's your boss. And that's critical for any AD, especially a first-time AD, I feel, to walk into a situation like that. And I think the second thing that you said, and really stuck with me, and a big reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is this notion of HBCUs being a great opportunity to be an athletic director. And I think sometimes historically, certain individuals hadn't looked at HBCU as, hey, I don't want to go that route. I want to go this route. But what you're seeing is, to what you just pointed out, one, the years of excellence that has been portrayed in Morgan State. I mean, there's a lot of Power 5 institutions that have 0 national championships, right? And here you are talking about national championships and NFL Hall of Famers. I grew up in the South, and all I knew was HBCU football, going to South Carolina State and North Carolina A&T games with both my parents who were HBCU grads. I never went to a South Carolina or UNC or Clemson game. I only went to HBCU football games. So I think there's almost been a little bit of awakening, I would call it. And I think you were one of the first, Anton Goff, obviously. And then you talk about a Courtney Gosha or a Jennifer at Alabama State, or even Dion going to Jackson State. I mean, what do you think about this transition or this increased popularity for a lot of administrators to look at HBCU ranks?
You know, I think you ask a really important question. It's for me, it was less about HBCU. In interest of full transparency, I had never worked or attended a historically Black college or university, let alone even a minority-serving institution. And there was something in talking with my wife that, you know, my wife in full transparency is white, you know, and I happen obviously to be African American. And when we were talking about the Morgan job, she said a couple things to me, as you know, your wife can do in ways that others can't. And she just said to me, you know, baby, wherever we've been, success has never had a color. Success is not Black, it's not white. It's the way you do your business. And when I heard my wife say that, it really opened up my eyes to the fact that you can be successful anywhere you want if you have a vision, if you have the right alignment, and you surround yourself with people who want to put in the work. And that was the key for me at Morgan State. I had spoken to Anton extensively. He is the only one that I've ever seen be able to go from a traditionally white institution to an HBCU and then back to a traditionally white institution. And for me, I want options. You know, I'm 41. I want to be able to have options in my career. And I just felt that Morgan could do that. And I think a lot of times, because of the limited resources at HBCUs, that we're reluctant to really dig in deep and see how great they can be. And so what I tell people is Morgan was a diamond in the rough. It was my job to, you know, to get it out of that area, to polish it up and start to let the world see how special of a place it is. And, you know, I'm really proud of Donald Reed and Courtney Gosha and Jennifer, you know, and for making the moves that they made, because they're great administrators. I know them all personally. I know them all professionally. And I think what happens when we bring quality folks to HBCUs, we bring diversity of experience to Black institutions because we've been at other places where we've seen how things are done that are transferable to HBCUs. And I think for me, that's been one of the special things to watch because we've had a lot of success at Morgan and we inherited a very difficult situation. But now that we've had success, I can tell you this. The one thing that makes me really proud in this space, Brian, is that since I've been at Morgan, I think almost every HBCU job that has been open, I've either heard from the institution about candidates and they wanted my opinion on it, and not as a search firm person, just as good faith, or I've heard from the candidates about how we've done what we've done at Morgan and can that be replicated at other places. And so Morgan, in a lot of ways, has become a trendsetter in this space. And I give, Dr. Wilson, again, a lot of credit for taking a chance on me as a first-time 36-year-old AD. Not a lot of places in the country that will do that, whether it's a historically Black institution or a predominantly white institution.
Absolutely. I think, something that's probably undervalued sometimes in college athletics is the value of uniqueness. I think sometimes we chase so hard after each other and trying to do what everybody else is doing, but there's something special about being unique because that presents an opportunity. And I think our HBCUs collectively are unique, operate in a unique space, but there's a lot of opportunity within that. And I think what you said about Courtney and Jennifer and some of these others, they're not great HBCU ADs. They're just flat out great ADs. They're great people. They're great individuals. I've known them as well as you have. And I have the highest respect for them. So you see that kind of talent going to these institutions and having success. It's quite frankly exciting. I'm the biggest cheerleader on the sideline for Courtney, for Jennifer, for yourself, because I see you guys doing big things. And I can't help but be just a little bit of proud just to have known you and see what you're doing, but probably doing them in a space that maybe others may have doubted. I know Courtney's talked publicly about that. People said, hey, don't go there. That'll be a career in their X, Y, and Z. But you guys are having a lot of success and doing some really amazing things. And you got people around you that support you, and that vision and alignment is really, really important. When you think about the institution and Morgan and HBCU in the ranks, and we talked a little bit about the administrators, but let's dive a little deeper into misconceptions, because I think what I've seen just from your path, you've had the ability to hire some really talented head football and men's basketball coaches. You've striked a new deal with Under Armour. You've just made a lot of progress in a lot of different areas. What are some of the misconceptions people have coming in to these HBCU opportunities?
I think the first one is that you probably won't get the support because there is limited resources, right? When I got to Morgan, and I think the listeners really need to understand this, the actual person who recommended me to Morgan State is the associate director of enforcement at the NCAA, Kathy Zielintik. And this just goes to networking real quick, Brian, and I know you know the importance of it. But Kathy and I had worked together when I was on the Division I baseball committee when I was at Binghamton, same time I met you. And for 3 years, we worked together. She was the staff liaison for the enforcement group to the Division I baseball committee. I hadn't talked to Kathy probably in 2 years, maybe a year and a half. And all of a sudden, when Morgan called, I said, excuse me, where'd you get my name from? And they just told me straight up, Kathy Zielintik, Associate Director of Enforcement, said that you're the perfect person to take on this task of helping us rebuild Morgan Athletics. So when you get an endorsement like that from the enforcement group, what I didn't know, and Morgan in full transparency gave me all this information in the interview process, was that Morgan was facing a really steep hill. We had 10 of our 14 teams facing a postseason ban. We were facing 5 years probation and a $60,000 fine. And here goes to the misconception part that you're talking about, right? So when I got to Morgan, I said, listen, we need to appeal this. And my deputy AD, Elise Wagner, is one of the best compliance people in all of the United States of America, hands down. She's one of the top in the country. And so her and I presented a case to the president and said, look, most HBCUs don't appeal these cases, or if they do, they don't make strong enough arguments. And you have to remember that you hired me and Elise, and we have a whole different set of experiences, and we understand this process. So we want to appeal. And long story short, we appealed the case, and we got 7 of the 10 teams off the postseason ban. We reduced probation from 5 years to 4, and we got the fine from $60,000 down to $19,000. And that was a really big early win to tell the rest of campus we're serious about athletics. And so I think sometimes when you don't have the resources, you think that you can't be successful. And I would argue that any AD in the country will tell you they don't have enough resources to compete at the level that they're at. So it's your job to be creative. And then that's where the alignment comes in across campus. one of the other things that you have to do, I think that's crucial at our level, Division One FCS, whether it's HBCU or not, is you got to be in alignment with campus. And so I spent a lot of time with our VP for institutional advancement, a lot of time with our VP for enrollment management, and a lot of time with our provost. And just said, look, here's my philosophy. Here's some of the things I think we can do, but we really have to work together to do this. And so we have a part-time person that splits time between the registrar's office and athletics now to make sure we don't have any of those same certification violations that we've had in the past, right? Very easy fix. But at the same time, the registrar's office now has an additional person that gives them 20 hours a week for general student records issues. So it's a win-win. And so I think that sometimes we have to get out of our own way and understand that not every situation as a leader is going to be perfect. And it's about what you make it. And just briefly on the head coaches piece, I've been blessed. I've been blessed to be able to attract a network of people throughout my career. Like your boss, Pat Chun, who are great mentors and friends. And so when it came time to hire coaches, I didn't just go what a lot of folks have done at HBCUs in the past. I went outside and broke the mold. Right. I hired Tyrone Wheatley, the All-American from Michigan in track and football, as our head football coach, because I thought that not only was his name recognition something that was important, but I thought his understanding of being a Black man playing high-level football would be something that would be so helpful for our young men. So I'll give you a quick example. Our guys, and I'm sure it happens at your level, we're going to go to the league. We're going to go to the league. So if they show up late to a meeting, he has a sheet outside his office. Now, we don't do this, so I don't want the NCAA to come in after this interview, Brian, and come get me. But he has a sheet on his wall, and it's the fine schedule in a lot of the professional football teams, right, of the NFL. And so if a guy's late to a meeting, he'll say to him, "What's it say on that sheet right there?" Fine, $20,000. And they look at him, "Coach, you're not serious. They don't do this in the NFL." He said, "Are you kidding me?" And so what he's done is he's just brought a different sense of accountability. And then on the men's basketball side, I was really blessed to be reunited with Kevin Brodus. He and I worked together at Binghamton, and he was the top assistant at College Park. And when we hired Kevin, he was ranked number 4 or 5 recruiter in all of Division I basketball. And so to be able to bring someone like him in, who's got these ties in the DMV area in Philadelphia, and who, like a lot of us African-American administrators, gets pigeonholed as a recruiter, what it's done is it showed folks that you can really attract some of the best talent in the country to HBCUs if you have a compelling vision and those individuals feel like they'll be supported and really have a chance to be successful. So again, we've just been really blessed. And I've just used the transferable skills that I built at predominantly white institutions and brought those to an HBCU without losing the history and tradition that's so important to us at Morgan State University.
Absolutely. And I think something you and I both agree on is just the value of relationships. And as I listen to you talk about, one, how you found out about the opportunity at Morgan State through a relationship formed on the baseball committee, that network, and then 2, how you hire head coaches and who you lean on to get names, to vet candidates, to bring talent in. Because we know, hiring these coaches is if it's not the top thing we do, it's certainly amongst the top most important things that we do, because it defines the student athlete experience. It defines the success of the institution in many ways. So I think the value of, and I hate to use the word networking because it feels dirty almost, but the relationship piece is just so important. I think sometimes we get too stuck on you're from business or your academics or your compliance or your development or whatever. It all boils down to relationships in my mind. I think you're a testament to the value of those relationships. So that kind of carries me to my next question, because you started your career in academics and then transitioned to kind of senior level leadership at a couple places, and I've started internally and expanded too. And something we always talk about is not getting pigeonholed, spreading your wings, but you've used relationships to have a lot of success on the revenue generation side, the development side, some of those others, in addition to hiring staff. Can you dive a little bit into kind of how you made that transition as a first-time AD, some of the success you've had?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. That's a huge reason why I took the job at Morgan State, right? You and I both know it. We've talked ad nauseum about this. All of us get pigeonholed. Fundraisers get pigeonholed, academic folks, compliance folks. And so I have been really, really intentional throughout my career and about looking at jobs that I thought would position me better in the future not just for jobs though, but to grow my skill set. Right. And so I'll give you an example of that. When I was at University of Louisville, I was working with Marvin Mitchell, who I would argue is as good as anybody in America when it comes to academics and student support services. And I remember when I interviewed with Marvin, he said, well, what's your career goals? I said, I'm going to be an athletic director. And he said, well, my man, I only have an associate director position of academics available. I said, no, that's okay. I understand. This is part of my progression. And he looked at me and was like, wow. And so I saw Marvin the last time we were in person at a NACDA, and he brought me over to a bunch of his academic folks and said, this little crazy guy right here told me he was going to be an AD, and he was really intentional about the moves. And so I left Louisville after 2 years because I just felt on the academic side, I had to go to a smaller institution to be able to get more diversity of experience. And when I left Louisville and I went to Binghamton, I quickly became a sport administrator. I was able to raise money for sport-specific initiatives. And then I got the athletic directors that we had at Binghamton to allow me, when they were trying to raise money with certain individuals that really wanted to know about the student-athlete experience, they would allow me to sit in on those fundraising meetings. And so that gave me a chance to learn and grow, but also be able to make a compelling argument for the student-athlete experience, because nobody can do it better than the academic and compliance folks who are around those student-athletes all the time, with the trainers and obviously your equipment people. I think that's where the student-athletes spend most of their time. And so for me, coming to Morgan, when I got here, I think we had 8 sponsorships, man. And we're in a top 15 media market in Baltimore. And so one of the things that I did intentionally when we got to Morgan is we really worked hard on our sponsorships. And I think now, don't hold me to this, but I think we have about somewhere between 44 and 47 sponsors. And so we've grown from 8 to about 45, let's say approximately 45 in the last 4 years. And the reason why was because we weren't telling our story, right? We weren't going out and engaging folks and trying to get them to understand why it was advantageous for their organization to partner with the national treasure, which is Morgan State University. So it's, being intentional early in my career about the moves I made allowed me to develop skills. So when I became a first-time AD, even though I wasn't a fundraiser or on the external side, I had a lot of familiarity with that side of the house. And then at Morgan, we raised some good money, especially for our size and scope. But in addition to that, when I got there, we didn't have an external arm at all. Now we have 2 folks in external, and we're in conversations with potential folks to come in and take over our tickets and our multimedia rights. If I told you I thought that would happen in 4 years at Morgan State, I'd be lying to you, Brian, and I wouldn't do that. So I'm super excited that folks really get the vision and they really understand how special Morgan is, and that's allowed us to do really well. And then we just launched the Bear Club, our annual fund. I was able to recruit. You talk about recruiting talent, man. I was able to recruit Lydell Sargent, the assistant AD for annual giving for UCLA athletics, all the way from Los Angeles to Baltimore, and he's our associate athletic director for development and revenue generation. And he literally just launched our Bear Club. And in the first 90 days of our Bear Club, we raised $100,000, and our entire athletic department, we have 100% giving in our athletic department in 90 days. If that doesn't tell you the folks at Morgan are all in, I don't know what does, because numbers don't lie.
Yeah, I mean, again, you dropped a bunch of gems there. I mean, one, Lydell's awesome. I had started paying attention to him even when he was at UCLA, and then I saw you get him. I said, boom, that's a huge recruiting job for Ed Scott to get Lydell to come across the country, because then people can dig into his background, but truly talented professional. But for you to grow sponsorships from 8 to 45 plus and counting, that is amazing. And I mean, that's a testament to you. And I think your vision on, hey, I know I have these skill sets and I can do this work, but I may need to go to what some would perceive as a smaller institution to get a broader range in the responsibilities and really lock myself out of the pigeonhole. And then I did the same thing when I left South Carolina, going back to Rice. I knew coming back to Rice, I could do a lot more with the broader set outside of compliance and be a sport administrator, do some fundraising, get involved in some revenue generation, and that's really set my career up. So I hope our people listening, especially some of those younger people plotting out their career, sometimes we get too stuck and say, well, I have to be at these top 5 Power 5 institutions or I'm not doing okay. And I think sometimes what you find is some other institutions can offer you a lot of opportunity to really grow, become better, sharpen your own pencil, so you're prepared for whatever may come down the line. And I think you're a testament to that.
I don't want to gloss over what you said about your own career, because you and I talked about that when you had opportunities. And I think by you going to Rice, it allowed you to grow your skill set in a way that when Pat Chun called, when he called me to see who was the best out there, it was really easy for me to say, look, if you don't look at Brian Blair, you're crazy. And so I think I don't want the listeners to gloss over the opportunity to go to different places and gain experience outside of your normal realm of responsibilities, what that can do for your networking and what that can ultimately set you up for as far as transferable skills for your next job. So I think you captured that really well, and I just wanted to drive that point home a little bit. Absolutely. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And shout out to Joe Cargard at Rice, who poured into me a ton while I was there and really took me from somebody walking into compliance to somebody that could do a lot of different things. And I think, you pointed out from your president to some people you worked for before, who you work for matters. And if they're looking out for you even when you're not in the room, that'll set your career for success. So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you and our relationship and been able to network there. And so you've done a ton at Morgan State, but I want to shift gears kind of for this last section and talk about MOA. And you're on the board right now as well as I, but you're going to slide into that presidency this summer. Talk a little bit about MOA, the vision there, and kind of what you hope to accomplish during your presidency.
Yeah, for all those who will be listening to this and may not know, as Brian described, MOA is the Minority Opportunities Athletic Association. And our vision is really to help all underrepresented groups in intercollegiate athletics. That's from NAIA to community colleges to Division 1, 2, and 3. And that's all races and all genders, right? The one beautiful thing about MOA is we do not discriminate. Our job is really to help folks grow. And we don't, I think one of the things folks get confused about, because we are under the NACDA umbrella, is that we don't specialize in one specific job type or description. MOA is for everybody, whether you're in facilities, compliance, fundraising, doesn't matter. And so I want to make sure folks understand that. And, the vision for me for MOA, as I'm going to take over for China Jude, who's done an outstanding job of following some really good past presidents, from Peggy to Sharon to Sean Frazier. My goal for MOA is a couple things. Number one, I want to be a resource for a lot of these other groups that are starting to pop up. As you know, I'm a member of the Black AD Alliance, and I've been blessed to be asked to serve on their executive committee. And I think that allows for a lot of good overlap between the two organizations, so we're not stepping on each other's toes. So I think that's important as we start to see some of these coaches groups pop up. I really would like MOA to be able to help others and get our arms around, because we're not just saying we're for Black ADs or we're for coaches in this area. We're saying we're willing to help anybody who needs our help. I would like to continue to grow the membership. A lot of individuals don't know that when I first joined MOA, they gave me the membership committee. I was the chair of the membership committee. And at that time, we had about 286 members. And I presented a plan to Sean Frazier, who was the president. And thank God for Sean. He said, man, this plan is ambitious, but I think you can do it. And so they let me run with the plan. And as you know, because you're on the board as well now, Brian, we have over 900 members. We're close to hitting 1,000. We've done that in about 5 years. We are the largest minority organization currently in intercollegiate athletics. And then my pet project as the president, because you know me well and you know how important developing others is for me. Because folks always ask me, when your career is said and done, what do you want your legacy to be? And if I can have a tree of individuals like a Gene Smith or a Kevin White, that for me will outweigh any national championships or any of those kind of things. So the Rising Stars program of MOA is something I really want to continue to solidify, make sure we have a firm foundation and make sure it's sustainable for future athletic administrators of color and women who come behind you and I. Because the one thing we know is that a critical mass of qualified individuals is extremely important, because the higher up we go, the less of opportunities there are and the less minorities and women who are qualified to take those opportunities. And so I think if we can grow that base at that, entry level, and then really feed that into the NCAA Leadership Institute, feed it into the Pathways program with Peter Roby, who I just love to death, and then also feed it into the pipeline of the Black AD Alliance. I think in, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you're going to start to see a larger group of qualified minorities and women athletic administrators who are going to be ready to take on the mantle from you and I, so I can go step away and teach some courses and travel and vacation,
I mean, I absolutely love, what you're doing, what we're doing, under China's leadership within MOA, the opportunity for you this summer. And I just think, right now in our country, MOA has a place in our space in college athletics to play a critical role. And I think we got a lot of talented individuals around the deck. So look forward to growing that. And Ed, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question. I think this has been an awesome conversation. I think our listeners will get a lot from this.
I appreciate it, Brian. And I'll tell you this, I appreciate the attention that I'm getting, but I'm just a servant of my student athletes and my coaches at Morgan State. And so for Morgan State to be recognized the way we have been, the NCAA now calls us a model of excellence for limited resource institutions, for you and others around the country to see what we've done at Morgan and really take notice. I'm just proud, and I'm happy to continue to serve our student athletes and just put Morgan in a position to be successful. Because at the end of the day, I think all the listeners need to understand this. These institutions that we work at were here long before us, and they're going to be here long after us. And it's our job to leave them better than we found it. And so I do know in my heart, whenever my next opportunity is, I don't know when that will be or where it will be, I just know that I will always have a special place in my heart for Morgan State, and I know Morgan State will be better off than when I found it, and that allows me to sleep really good at night. So I thank you, and I thank the others for taking the time and paying attention to what we're doing at Morgan. It means a lot.
Well said. I appreciate you. That was Ed Scott, Director of Athletics at Morgan State University, and of course, this is Brian Blair, Deputy Athletic Director at Washington State University. Thanks for tuning in, and please remember, stay humble, stay curious. We'll catch you next time.
This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.